Mario Kart is my personal favorite Mario spin-off series. It would be the RPGs, but the 2010s say otherwise. Few other games have given me such a unique sense of fun, wonder, adrenaline, and pure unbridled rage as these. And since we're probably never gonna get Mario Kart 9, I decided to go through this series of games to rank them all. Okay, maybe not all per se, because there will be some exclusions. I'm not counting Mario Kart Live home circuit for the ranking, since I feel like that's more of a toy than a proper game, and it's also a little pricey. As for the Arcade GP sub-series, I'm not including any of them either. VR is obviously out of the question since it's extremely restricted, being only available in Japan with a steep entry fee for what you're getting. The first three, however, I actually did consider including on the list for the longest time. However, I scanned almost every arcade near me, and while DX showed up a lot, I could not find either of the first two games anywhere, and I do not want to go through the trouble of setting them up on Dolphin. Since ranking DX alone without one or two would feel wrong, I decided to just cut all three of them out. All I'm gonna say about them right now is that GPDX absolutely slaps. If there's a cabinet for it near you, stuff every loony you have in it. With all that out of the way, let's go!
Okay, so if you couldn't tell by now, I don't really like Super Mario Kart. It's by far the worst game in the franchise, and I don't think you can possibly make an argument that it's not.
I can! Mario Kart Tour sounds like it would be fun at first. A Mario Kart game you can play on your phone, with tracks from all across the series up to 7, with numerous new tracks and variations of old ones, with a wide variety of characters and costumes. How could you possibly screw it up? It's simple. Make it a free-to-play mobile game. And being a free-to-play mobile game, you just have to front-load it with microtransactions and gacha mechanics. Yeah, I know they got rid of the latter, but does it really matter when everything is still so damn strict and expensive? And what's so impressive about having so many tracks when only like 10 of them are available every 2 weeks? Does it get better when you look past all that? Not really. The controls in this game are so awkward. The steering feels really finicky, especially on some of the bumpier tracks, and it's easy to accidentally use an item when switching between steering and drifting, since you just need to tap the screen to use one. The automatic acceleration and trick system don't help either, as they make the game feel so dumbed down. Everything about this game in general feels so artificial and dry. The plastic art style, the CPUs having fake usernames, the annoying, pointless score system, and generally automated feeling gameplay loop just bores the life out of me. It has almost none of the series' usual charm, and I see no reason to ever go back to it since everything it does well is either A, only available for a limited time, or B, already in one of the other games anyway. I could go further, but why would I? Mario Kart Tour is just another terrible mobile cash grab and nothing more. They could have made a proper Mario Kart for mobile, but I guess it had to be free to play somehow. Though I guess if you really want to play Mario Kart on your phone, download an emulator and get a ROM of DS. Thank me later. Anyway, the worst real Mario Kart is Super Mario Kart. Wow, what a surprise. To say that this game does not hold up would be a massive understatement. Don't get me wrong, I can see why this game was a must-own back in the 90s. Being able to race go-karts with a friend as a selection of iconic and beloved Mario characters, including Bowser, who had never been playable before then, must have been an absolute joy for the average early 90s kid. There's just one problem. It's been over 30 years, and as I said, this game does not hold up. For starters, this game is an absolute nightmare to control. The steering and drifting are unbearably floaty. It's hard to make even a single turn without spinning out. I don't get it. F-Zero came out a year prior on the same system, and it controls fine, especially for the time. And if you miss a turn and lose all your speed, which you will, good luck trying to catch up, because the CPUs do not play fair. They use their very own items whenever the hell they want, and also have horrendous rubber band AI that keeps them right behind you when you're in the lead, but doesn't give you even the slightest chance to come back if you fall behind. It doesn't help that the track selection is far and away the worst in the series. There are like 2 or 3 moderately decent tracks, and the rest are either bland and forgettable at best, or contending for the worst track in the whole series at worst. Tons of repeated settings, punishing turns, and general bad design make them all a chore to race on. At the end of the day, it's still the first Mario Kart. The series literally wouldn't exist without it, and I have to applaud Nintendo for doing the best they could on a 16-bit console. Even so, there's honestly no reason to play it today, especially since we eventually got an actually playable Mode 7 Mario Kart. Speaking of which,
Coins are back, bitches!
Mario Kart Super Circuit is probably the most overlooked out of the mainline Mario Karts. I've seen a lot of people unfairly dismiss this game, likely due to it being Mode 7 like Super was. Despite being Mode 7, Super Circuit is actually pretty fun. The controls, for one, are far better than they were in Super. Not perfect by any means, but it feels just tight enough for a flat kart racer. It also has a surprisingly strong track selection. Sure, there are a few stinkers like Snowland, both of the Ghost tracks, and the worst Rainbow Road. Even the SNES and Wii U ones are better. Despite those, there are still a ton of hidden gems among these tracks, like Riverside Park, Ribbon Road, Sunset Wild, Sky Garden, Bowser Castle 3, and several others. You can also unlock the track layouts from Super Mario Kart if you want to play those with functional controls. With all this praise, why is Super Circuit still this low? Well, that's because that's all there really is to this game. It's fun, but there isn't much of a reason to go back to it since multiplayer requires setting up link cables, and most of its tracks got remade in later games, even if not all tracks were treated equal. Sunset Wilds, I am so sorry. While there isn't really any reason to play Super Circuit over any of the other games in the series these days, I still decently enjoy it and think it deserves more credit. Please bring Bowser Castle 4 back in the next game.
Mario's newest adventure unfolds as he takes to the sky, land, and sea.
Mario Kart 7 was a household name on the 3DS. It introduced various new mechanics that are now series staples like kart customization as well as glider and underwater segments. Customizing your kart not only helps you adjust to your playstyle, as it also makes you drip out your ride in ways you could only dream of previously. I love the glider ramp so much. Being able to glide in the air for long periods of time and control where I land is an absolute blast. The underwater segments are nothing to sneeze at either, as they let you head through terrain you couldn't in past games. They're mesmerizing, and the floatier physics underwater are a nice bonus. The new tracks this game has to offer are alright. There are quite a few gems, like Music Park, DK Jungle, the Woohoo Island tracks, and one of the best Rainbow Roads. But there's also quite a bit of mediocre trite, like most of the Mushroom Cup, a disappointing Bowser's Castle, and Rosalina's Ice World. Where this game's track list really shines, however, is with its retro track selection. This game brought back so many classics, like Koopa Troopa Beach, Calamari Desert, Daisy Cruiser, Waluigi Pinball, Airship Fortress, Coconut Mall, Maple Treeway, and various others. And they all feel great to play in this game with its smooth controls and boost system. 7 was, and still is, a very solid and fun game. But because nearly every innovation it made has become the norm, it kinda lives in the shadow of a game we'll see later on. Still, it's a good-ass game that deserves to be remembered fondly.
Oh, hey, Taco Bell! 64!
Mario Kart 64 was the first good Mario Kart. I remember seeing a lot of YouTubers back in the day gas this game up as the best racing game ever made. It was obviously out of nostalgia blindness since this game has not aged very well, but I can definitely see why it was so beloved back then. I don't really know how to describe it, but 64 has this simplistic charm to it. The basic track layouts, the flat background visuals, the funny voice clips, the fact that the characters are all 2D sprites when they could and should have been 3D models, it's all so weirdly captivating. The controls aren't half bad, especially for an early N64 game. Drifting feels slick and satisfying, and having to move the stick left and right to boost from it is a good use of risk versus reward. With that said, the somewhat dated controls can kind of trip you up on some of the tighter tracks like Yoshi Valley. The track selection overall is so-so. There are a few gems like Koopa Troopa Beach, Royal Raceway, and Bowser's Castle, but the rest is generally kind of whatever, with the worst tracks like Frap Snowland and Toad's Turnpike being some of my least favorites in the series. The item balancing is also a bit clunky, and the lack of invincibility frames doesn't help either. Even with its flaws, Mario Kart 64 is full of 5th gen charm and is still pretty fun to this day. Even though it came out 8 years before I was born and I didn't play it until about 2.5 years ago, I feel weirdly nostalgic about it. It probably has something to do with the dated charms I just went over.
Need something? Then Funky Kong is the guy to see.
Mario Kart Wii is the most frustrating, downright rage-inducing game in the series. It pulls no punches when it comes to making the player rage with its item balancing. It feels like every other second you're being bombarded with every last item on the track until you're dead last. No matter how well you do, you will always face the wrath of the RNG gods. Just as hefty of a trial is conquering its controls. Sure, you are given the option to not use the heavily marketed tilt-controlled steering, but you're still forced to shake the remote to trick if you're using a nunchuck, or use the D-pad if you're using a GameCube or Classic controller. I'm so glad they remapped tricking to the drift button in 7. Also, why does this game look so ugly a lot of the time? The generic UI, blocky models, and washed out color palette have not aged well, especially since there are other games on the Wii that are visually miles ahead of this game, even a few that came out before it. And despite all that, I love this game so much. Mario Kart Wii has endured as a fan favorite for nearly 17 years, and it's easy to see why. Drifting has been reworked to require you to just hold down the drift button instead of rapidly mashing the stick or D-pad. While I can see why some people don't like this change, I personally love it. It feels way more intuitive, and it's also much easier to stay on the track while drifting with this new system. You can now do tricks off of ramps and other inclines, giving you a burst of speed, and it's a lot of fun to seek out different trick opportunities. Bikes have also been introduced, and their unique mechanics are a lot of fun, even if they kinda render karts obsolete in this game with their wheelies. While there are some stinkers in the retro track selection, there are still a few gems, like N64 Bowser's Castle, Waluigi Stadium, DK Mountain, and Delfino Square. The Nitro track selection, however, is where this game's tracks really shine. It honestly might be the best Nitro track list in the series. The only new tracks I call even slightly subpar are the Luigi and Mario circuits, which are usually lame, and Moo Moo Meadows. Aside from those flukes, it's just banger after banger. Mushroom Gorge, Toad's Factory, Coconut Mall, DK Summit, Maple Treeway, Moonview Highway, and many others are all longtime classics. But none of them, I repeat, none of them compare to this game's Rainbow Road. This is my favorite track in all of Mario Kart. It pulls out all the stops to be the most difficult track this series has seen to date, while still managing to be fun and exciting rather than frustrating. Between that and its beautiful presentation, it's the culmination of everything I adore about Mario Kart, both the joy and the rage. There are many reasons why Mario Kart Wii is still so beloved and popular to this day, from its tracks, to its music, to its massive modding scene, to the terabytes of memories people have made with it. It was, for a time, the ultimate Mario Kart, until it was eventually topped by an even bigger, better game. But before we get to that, we still have a couple of other games left to talk about, so let's dash right to them.
Prepare for trouble! Make it double!
Mario Kart Double Dash is quite possibly the most unique entry in the series. Rather than playing as only one character per round, you control two on one cart. This isn't just a cosmetic thing, as each character has their own item slot. Since you're able to switch between who's driving and who's throwing items mid-race, there's a lot of strategy that comes with storing items to use later. Want to save a mushroom for a shortcut but don't want to throw away your banana shield? Just switch characters and save it for when the time is right. Not only that, but various items like the Fireball and Bob-omb are tied to specific characters, encouraging you to mix and match different characters to find different strategies. Double Dash's items are practically the lifeblood of the game, even more so than any other game in the series, except for the arcade games and I guess Tour. Considering how creative Mario spin-offs could get in the GameCube era, Double Dash has a wildly unique and mostly fun track list. With only two real stinkers in Dry Dry Desert and Sherbet Land, there are so many classics here, like Baby Park, Daisy Cruiser, Waluigi Stadium, Yoshi's Circuit, DK Mountain, and a great Bowser's Castle. Though what kinda stings is that my two favorite tracks in this game, Mushroom City and Wario Coliseum, have never come back in a future game. Like, come on, Wario Coliseum would be perfect for anti-gravity, and Mushroom City, just bring it back already! The steering in this game is a little sensitive, especially on some of the tighter tracks, but it's still responsive and fun to build up speed. And the game's soundtrack is super catchy and memorable. Even after over 20 years, Double Dash is one of the most creative, chaotic, and consistently fun games in the series. And I always enjoy booting it up on my PC, totally legal GameCube to go a few rounds, even though there are still two more games in the series that surpass it in my mind. Mario Kart DS was my first Mario Kart. I lost the cartridge in my backyard and didn't get a new one for almost a decade. Personal mishap aside, wow, what a great introduction to the series for me. This was the last game to have you mash the D-pad to build up a boost from drifting. And between each of the first 5 games, it easily handles it the best. Simply drifting around turns already feels intuitive, but mashing the D-pad back and forth to build up a boost adds so much risk for reward, especially if you try it in the middle of a straightaway just to maintain top speed. It's a game that's easy to play, but hard to master, which to me is the best way to handle a game made for casual and hardcore gamers. It helps that DS has a very strong track selection. It gets off to a rough start with 2 of the most basic tracks in the series, but it quickly picks up the slack to give us so many iconic tracks. What's cool is that numerous tracks in this game are inspired by locations from previous Mario games. Desert Hills and Airship Fortress are both inspired by Mario 3, Tick-Tock Clock and Peach Gardens are based on areas from 64, Delfino Square is themed around Sunshine, Boston Building takes you through Luigi's Mansion, expansion, and they're generally a lot of fun to race on. And the wholly original tracks like Cheep Cheep Beach, Shroom Ridge, Wario Stadium, Bowser's Castle, and especially Waluigi Pinball are a blast as well. The 16 Nitro tracks aren't the only tracks here, however, as DS is the first game in the series, not counting Super Circuit, to feature retro tracks, a selection of tracks returning from previous games. Sure, the selection is not great due to technical limitations, and the Nitro tracks obviously bend the retros over backwards, but it's still cool to see these old tracks come back at all, and it laid the foundations for a staple feature that later games expanded greatly on. The battle mode is one of the series' best thanks to a great selection of modes and maps. There's a mission mode with an assortment of unique challenges, and you can make your own emblems. That's cool. Between its deep strategic controls, nostalgic tracks, and other features, Mario Kart DS is an absolute blast, and it remains so after almost 20 years. It wears the essence of the mid-2000s on its sleeve, and I always look forward to revisiting it, even for just a quick round. And yet, it's not quite the best Mario Kart. As amazing as it isn't quite as deluxe as the #1 entry.
Mario Kart 8!
I mean, come on, what were you expecting? Seriously, what else could it have been? Mario Kart 8 Deluxe is the best-selling game in the entire Mario franchise for a reason. The Wii U original was already incredible, but the upgrades and extra content in Deluxe pin it to the top of the list. I'm still ranking both versions in the same spot because to me, Mario Kart 8 is Mario Kart 8. The controls are pretty much perfect. The steering is smoother than ever, making even the tightest turns feel fair. Trying to hold a drift for as long as possible to get the biggest boost is more fun, effective, and satisfying than ever. Such smooth drifting is enough to make me have fun on just about any track. About said tracks, Mario Kart 8 has a killer lineup of Nitro tracks. The worst ones are merely kinda forgettable, while the best ones like Thwomp Ruins, Toad Harbor, Shy Guy Falls, Sunshine Airport, Electrodrome, Mount Wario, Cloudtop Cruise, and Bowser's Castle are all instant classics. The new anti-gravity segments really set them apart, adding so many more dynamic and twisted layouts than ever seen before. As for the retro tracks, rather than simply being ported over, they've now been remade from the ground up to be graphically on par with the Nitro courses. While there are some duds, they're generally just as fun as the Nitro tracks, with certain tracks like GameCube Sherbetland and N64 Rainbow Road getting insane glow-ups. I want to move back a bit to touch on the graphics because hot damn does this game look stunning. The colors, the textures, the lighting, the effects, all of it comes together to form one of the best looking games in Nintendo's whole library. And the soundtrack. I'm just gonna come right out and say it. Mario Kart 8 Deluxe has my favorite soundtrack in the entire Mario franchise. This is the first and currently only Mario Kart to have its music recorded live instead of synthesized, and they did a phenomenal job with the new pieces and remixes of old ones. They're bombastic, they're dynamic, and they sell the game's chaotic pace perfectly. Topped off with a great battle mode with fun maps and modes, in Deluxe at least, as well as an excellent lineup of 16 DLC tracks, some of which were based on other franchises, you have a recipe for a strong contender for the best Mario Kart. And then the Booster Course Pass came along to Deluxe and solidified it. I'm not gonna act like the BCP is perfect. Far from it. Due to the tracks being ported over from Tour, the graphics are generally not up to the standards of the base game, especially in the early waves, and some tracks were definitely treated better than others. Regardless, it still brought back so many classic tracks while immortalizing nearly all the Tour tracks. Playing all these classics from across the series alongside the new gems with the smoothest controls, liveliest music, and, depending on the track, prettiest graphics is a dream come true. Before, Mario Kart 8 was, at least to me, the best Mario Kart. Now, it's the definitive Mario Kart. We're still well overdue for a proper new entry, of course, but as great as it could end up being, I have no idea how it could possibly have any hope of topping this.